everybody. Welcome to our series on making decisions under duress. I'm Dr. Lisa Lang. I'm a TOC-ICO certified expert and the chief TOC expert here at Science of Business. Some people call me the job shop whisperer. I am the head coach for our Velocity Scheduling System coaching program. Presenting today, we've got Brad Stallon. He is a TOC-ICO certified expert. He's also a certified exit planner. He is our TOC pricing expert, and he is the job shop pricing coach, one of our two coaches, along with our main presenter today, who is Bo Gannis. Bo is the throughput accounting guru. He is a CPA and certified management accountant and a recovering cost accountant. While in public accounting, Bo specialized in the application of cost accounting to small and medium-sized manufacturers. Bo has also served as the controller of a specialized steel products manufacturer, developing mine-resistant armor-protected vehicles and other heavy steel products, and will be sharing his experiences along the way in today's session. So with that, I hand it over to Brad and Bo.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Lisa. And like we did last time, let's just go back to the title slide and revisit it quickly here. But today is Making Decisions Under Duress, and it's part 2, Capacity Management and Pricing Strategy. And we had part 1 previously, which was financial realignment. And so if you missed that, do go back and check out that video there. But today, again, we're faced with that situation of, are we the frog that's going to hang out in the pot and boil, or are we going to jump? That's really what we want to get to today. And so again, just as in part 1, realizing when to act is key. So we want to provoke you to evaluate the need to act sooner versus later in your business to make the best of what you're faced with. Now, just like in the first presentation, this can take many different forms. It may mean producing a meager profit. It may mean striving to break even. And that's bolded because that's going to be our focus today. Because if we can break even in the worst of times, survive, hopefully we can return to profitability when the economy and other things turn back around. Now, finally, it might also mean evaluating options related to terminating the business. Today, we want to focus on ensuring that you recognize the importance of capacity in generating throughput margin and ultimately a profit, or at least breaking even, before it's too late.
And the situation is such that outside forces, government, is imposing capacity restrictions on your business, or effectively imposing capacity restrictions on your business. And that's going to completely change the formula for making money. And that's what we want to address directly today.
Let's discuss some changes in job shop capacity. So how has COVID-19 impacted shop capacity? Well, several ways. Maintaining a distance of 6 feet between workers, limited interactions, and managing 2-person jobs, etc. How do you do a 2-person lift of a heavy object in the shop and stay 6 feet apart? Wearing masks, as may be required in your state or by CDC guidelines. Well, if you ever have worn a respirator or a mask, it's hard. It tires out workers, and it's just one more thing to deal with. I left it in the truck. Where is it? My string broke. I need another one. It's just one more bit of administrivia that we have to rope into the day now. You may have a limited number of personnel allowed in your facility at any one time. There's increased sanitation, hand washing, cleaning, all these types of things, and they may take away from productive time. You have the unavailability of certain folks. So maybe an engineer that was, just inside the office and could alter plans or create new routings or whatever it is. Well, now they're at the house and they have a screaming 5-year-old, and they're dealing with the dog and the wife, all kinds of things going on, and they're just not available as you had them before. And then you also have management's attention. Well, it's spread thin. You've got PPP, the PPE, social distancing, washing hands, wearing masks, taking temperature, running 2 shifts, talking to customers, talking to the bank, talking to suppliers, and oh yeah, by the way, someone's got to run these jobs. And so, if you're the business owner right now, I can imagine you are stressed out, overworked, and just running at wit's end. And it's like, when are we going to get through this? And every day just seems to compound on top of all the uncertainty and just what's ahead. We're thinking about the safety of ourselves, our families, our workers, and then how to navigate this thing so that we're profitable. That'd be ideal, but if nothing worse, that we break even.
So I think maybe we've understated may take away from productive time. It will take away from productive time, and maybe in such a significant way that we have to be either much more productive, which is going to be difficult to do, or consider price increases.
Right. So how might we translate this into an example we can all relate to? Well, we came up with a potential scenario. Suppose you operate a restaurant and your state requires a minimum of 6 feet between patrons not of the same party. Your restaurant has generally had one main service each night. What we're going to do is walk through a few alternatives this restaurant owner might consider. So welcome to Yagana's Soup Kitchen International, where customer service is job number 1, as he is indicating right here. So this is a picture of what the restaurant looked like pre-pandemic. There were 7 booths, 8 tables, and that led to about 60 patrons during that one service in an evening. Okay. Now, post-pandemic, what do we look like? Well, here's the new look at the restaurant. Well, we've had to close certain booths, we've had to remove certain tables, and we've also had to alter the experience due to that social distancing. We can squeeze in some capacity, but it may not be ideal. And that's what we're showing down here with the cold soup table. Okay. So let's see. So again, what we're going to do is use that buy-in process framework to guide this conversation that we're having here. And so the first step is to agree on the objective. And we've verbalized that as to remain solvent and survive until such time that economic conditions stabilize. They don't have to be perfect. They're not going to improve dramatically, but just survive through until we can get a good sense of what the new normal looks like and how we might begin to stop treading water and begin to actually swim again. So next, we need to agree on the problem. Now, this is largely the same from our first video, but number 1, the throughput margin we expect to generate is insufficient to cover our operating expenses. Said differently, throughput margin, or money in, is not enough to cover operating expenses, which is money out. Okay, so less is coming in than what's going out. We can only generate a reduced amount of throughput relative to the pre-pandemic levels. Now, 2A there is our capacity for serving customers has been limited by government decree. That'd be the social distancing, limited number of people, all those types of things. 3, sources of new throughput margin take some time, more than what we have, to get into place. 4th, the cash flow we expect to generate is negative and may consume and exceed any financial buffers we have, that being cash reserves, debt financing, or other funding sources like personal financing. And many operating expenses are necessary for continuing operations. And so we see that the operating expenses are sticky and they're just not going to go away in many cases. And so the challenge is, how do we bring in enough money to cover those operating expenses?
So in this situation, just like first video, we colored the throughput blue compared to the throughput margin green. And if you go back up to the potential scenario, so just because somebody comes and sits in the dining area now under the new normal doesn't mean that they'll order something on the menu for the same price. Could be more, could be less. So not only are we managing the physical throughput, the people that are coming to eat, but we're also managing the throughput margin represented by what they order.
Right. And so, in the context of a restaurant, if someone orders an appetizer with their meal versus not ordering an appetizer with the meal, they may be at the restaurant from the same duration of time and it still had the same meal, if you will, dinner, but someone's going to bring you a lot more dollars if they would order the appetizer versus not ordering that appetizer. Okay.
We recognize that job shops are not restaurants. We're just trying to find an example that we all can relate to and then apply it to the job shop.
Right. So in looking at the criteria for a good solution, and remember again, in the buy-in process, we don't want to jump automatically to the best idea that you might have. What we want to do is describe what a good idea in any shape, form, or fashion would look like. And that leaves us open to a wider variety of possibilities. So here again, we said the business survives, and that means we generate a sufficient amount of throughput margin such that we cover our operating expense at a minimum, given our limited capacity. 2, we retain as many of our good key employees as possible. And third and finally, ownership is able to preserve and protect personal assets as best they can. Okay. Now, this is the step in the process where we agree on the direction of the solution. We're not necessarily going to provide and say, this is the one prescription. We just, again, want to present the alternatives here. And normally, Brad and I, what we do is we come up with at least, in good form, different alternatives. So one being an extreme, one end of the spectrum, one kind of middle of the road, and then another at the other end of the spectrum. Now, here today, what we have as our 4 alternative directions of the solution would be 1, increase capacity, 2, increase productivity, 3, raise prices, or 4, reduce totally variable costs. Now, the 4th, we don't know that that's very likely, but nonetheless, it still is, in fact, an option. Now, we're not going to talk about reducing operating expense, as that was covered in our previous video, Making Decisions Under Duress, Part 1, Financial Realignment. So today we're all about capacity, productivity, and pricing, and any mix or combination of those. Okay. So let's go back to our example, and let's talk about increasing capacity and what that might mean. So here we are, we're at the restaurant. How might the owner increase his available capacity? Well, in today's world, that might mean he could have folks dine outside. Maybe there's maybe there's no requirement for spacing outside, or maybe you're allowed to be closer because you're outside. The owner might consider renting adjacent or adjoining space to the restaurant. He might consider extending hours. He might also consider opening up for other services like breakfast, lunch, in addition to that dinner service, or some combination thereof. In terms of increasing productivity, well, how might the owner increase the productivity of the existing capacity? Well, you could have 2 services for dinner. So instead of typically having that dinner course, around 7 o'clock for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe you have a 5:30 dinner service and a 7:30 dinner service. You may reduce the average duration of a meal. So maybe you, instead of waiting until folks are through with the main course to bring the check out, maybe you bring the check with the main course. Maybe you operate in such a way that you take on takeout orders, or you interact with a delivery service to deliver meals to folks. So you're still able to utilize that kitchen, flow more orders through there, and flow more dollars through the business. Now, all these actions result in increasing the productivity of the restaurant. That is to say, productivity increases when more T, or throughput margin, is generated for the same level of OE, or operating expense.
So I can imagine that there's some buts in our audience. Like, how can I go from 1 service to 2 services? How can I reduce the average duration of a meal? We're going to address the buts later. But yes, it's obvious that we're looking for some behavior change on the part of our customers. So just as we've been impacted by reduced capacity, we're going to impact our customer base probably with a request for a change in behavior.
Right. And ultimately, we do have, coming in slide 14, we're going to bring this back to a job shop. So stay with us through the example, because not all of this is directly transferable. Well, what are you going to do? You don't have 2 dinner shifts or 2 dinner services. Yeah, we get that. But the point is, changing that customer behavior may be required. Okay.
So the analogy there would be running 2 shifts instead of 1.
Right. So increased pricing. So how might the owner increase pricing to generate more throughput margin? Well, the first bullet point there, just charge more. Yes, just charge more for the same stuff. That would be a price increase. Now, doesn't mean it's going to go over well, but it's certainly an option. They may package meals into different options. So for instance, you might require your customers to buy an appetizer or a dessert with the meal. You might create unique, exclusive, never before enjoyed items, a chef sampler pack, or any number of things. I've seen restaurants here locally in the Charleston area create meal kits from the chef himself, if you will, that you can buy and take home and cook yourself. You might set minimum meal charges. So we have a $30 minimum versus no minimum previously. You might require a minimum number of guests in a party. So you got to have at least 3 people to have a reservation. We don't have any 2-person tables anymore. You might charge for items not previously charged for explicitly. For instance, bread at an Italian restaurant or chips at a Mexican restaurant. Now, I would not like that, but hey, it might be the new normal that we're heading into, okay? I love chips. Charge more for an early service or the same for a later service or vice versa. So if we go to that 2-service model, maybe someone's like, well, I don't really want to eat at 5:30. Well, how might we induce that? You may hold prices the same for the 5:30 service, but raise prices for your 7 or 7:30 service. So again, think about the pricing as a tool to shape and guide customer behaviors, okay? You might charge for staying beyond a reserved time slot. So, hey, if you want to stay, you're welcome to rent the table. It's $25 every 30 minutes. Enjoy. Sit, chat, have a good time. You may also have reservation fees that are due at the time of reservation. So you may not take reservations without getting $50 up front. So you know you're going to at least get $50 from the meal, some way, some shape, some fashion, okay? So those are all potential options for the restaurant related to increasing its pricing. Now, what we want to do is paint a picture for some folks that are number oriented, what this would shake out to be across a number of different scenarios, looking at changes in capacity, productivity, and pricing, okay? So here we have a slide, and we have in this first row, this is the normal scenario, if you will. We had about 60 patrons a night. They spent on average $35.57. The meal cost $10.70 in terms of the ingredients that went into it. So that would be, from a throughput accounting perspective, those totally variable costs. In the job shop world, that would be your material, your outside services, freight, sales commissions, royalty, perhaps packaging, those type things. It's not labor and it's not overhead, okay? That's the key. That leaves us with earning per meal $24.87. So every night that we were open for a service, we would expect to generate $1,492.20. Okay, so this is our baseline of $1,492. Now we have down here that we've assumed operating expenses of about $1,200 a day. So in our baseline example, we're pulling in $1,492. We have $1,200 of operating expenses every day, so we're making about $292 every night that we're open. Okay. Now the new normal, if we did nothing, we just kind of moved the tables around, closed all certain booths, and served those that showed up. Well, our capacity is reduced to 36 patrons a night, same ticket, average ticket price, same cost per meal, and same throughput per meal. That means we're making $895.32 a night. Only 60% of the throughput that we were originally making. Now, that's roughly $900. We have $1,200 of expenses a day. That means we're now losing $300 every night that we're open. Not a good situation, okay?
That's the red flag that something needs to change.
Right, right. This isn't sustainable. We can't just sit in the pot and do nothing, because unless we want to dole out $300 a night just for the love of working in a restaurant, this is not going to go well for us, okay? So let's go to our next scenario after the new normal, and let's evaluate what would happen if we increase productivity by 10%. So we would add 3.6 people. Now we're just going to round up and call that 4. If a 0.6 person walks into your restaurant, let us know. We'd like to see that. So we have now 40 people coming in on a night. Same average ticket price, same meal cost, same throughput margin being generated. Now we go to $994.80, which is about 67% of the original throughput margin we were earning a night. Still in the red, okay, but we're about $200 in the red versus being $300 in the red. So it's an improvement, but it's not sufficient given our level of operating expenses, okay? So the question Brad and I asked ourselves was, what would it take in terms of a productivity change to get back to normal, okay? That normal level of throughput margin. Well, the increase in productivity that's required to get back to normal levels of throughput margin is a 67% increase in that productivity, okay? So that's a boundary condition. That means we've got to get 2/3 more dollars or 2/3 more output out of the same people, resources, and building in this time of pandemic. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to make par or make back what we were making previously, okay? Now, we may still be able to break even at a lower level than this, but this does set a boundary condition of what it takes to get back to where we were, okay?
Yeah, and literally so, that we still are able to have 60 patrons. The question is how?
Right.
How can we get back with the reduced seating, with the forced capacity reduction? How can we be creative and still serve as many people?
Right. So those are our productivity scenarios. The next one is looking at, well, what would happen if we raise our prices by about 10%? So that means our average ticket price goes from about $35.57 to $39.13 there. Same meal cost. We're just earning a little bit more throughput margin for every meal for every patron. So it goes from $24.87 to $28.43. Now that, without a productivity change, we're still at our new normal level of 36 patrons per night. Well, that helps us earn $1,023.48. That's roughly 68.6%. I'm going to call it 70% of our original normal level of throughput margin that we were earning previously. Now here, we're still in the red. We're still about $200 in the hole every night that we're opening in this fashion, okay? Now with the pricing, what we said was, well, what would it take to get back to the normal level of throughput margin via a price increase? Doesn't mean we're going to consider this, but it's, again, a boundary condition that we might study and ask ourselves, how do we make this actually happen? And that's what's in this row, is that scenario. So that means we have to raise prices 47%. Now, that means our average ticket goes from $35.57 to $52.15. That's a pretty steep price increase, all right? Same meal cost. Now, our per meal throughput has jumped to $41.45, and that brings us back to that normal level, if you will, of throughput margin of $1,492.20. So we've made it back to normal levels of throughput margin. The question, again, is how can we do this? How can we get these prices up to $50.15? Okay.
Unfortunately, in this environment, people would probably accuse you of price gouging, when in fact, all you're trying to do is get back to normal business conditions.
Right, right. So our next scenario, we did a little bit of both. Now, that means we're going to increase productivity by 30%. So we realized 10% is not going to cut it, but man, I don't think we could get to 67%. Okay, so let's settle on 30%, and we're going to raise prices about 20%. I think it's like 19.7 or 19.8 technically, but if you wanted to check the math there, but we're going to call it 20% just for round numbers. So as a result, that means we go from serving 36 people in a service to 45 people in a service, okay? That means our average ticket price goes from $35.57 to $42.45. Same per meal cost. Our throughput margin is now $31.75, and that brings us back to that normal level of throughput margin of $1,492.20. So this seems a little bit more palatable, perhaps. 30%, that's a lot, but it's not insurmountable, perhaps, as many folks would say, like the 67%. And a 20% price increase, well, it's not pretty, but it might be more well received than a 47% price increase. And maybe we avoid that price gouging, negative ramification by going with a little bit smaller price increase. So this scenario just gives you a sense of how we could use these two things in tandem to get back to the normal level. Now, finally, we're going to here's an extreme. We're going to throw this out at you. we could increase productivity by 100%. That's a lot.
Compared to the new normal. It'd
Right.
be 20% more than the normal.
Right. So maybe not that much for the kitchen, perhaps, because they were used to doing 60 patrons a night. But in terms of our, our thought process, our mentality, the way we've operated, especially given what we're thinking about, only having 36 folks come through in a normal service, we're going to 72 folks. Okay, so that's a radical change. Now, how could we do this? Well, this could be the example of doing 2 services and shortening that meal. Okay, bring the check with the dinner. We can now bring in 72 patrons versus 36. And look at what happens. Same pricing. We had the same TVCs, same throughput margin, but at 72 folks, we're now bringing in $1,790.64. That means we're making close to $600 a day. That's phenomenal. So we put that in there to illustrate the impact that productivity, along with pricing, can have on your bottom line and how much money or throughput margin you're able to pull into your business. Again, we're still in the restaurant world, but obviously we can see there are ways to get back to normal via pricing. There are ways to get back to normal via productivity. There's ways to do both. And we put productivity in here instead of pricing because productivity was one of the things that's totally under your control. Now, we might argue something different in the job shop pricing system. We tend to believe that pricing is more under your control than what you might think at this time. But everyone can agree, we're the ones running the machines. We're the ones operating the folks. It's our business. This is our productivity. And so you have control over that. And so realizing the impact that it has on your bottom line and the ability of your business to generate throughput margin is critical right now. So let's now get out of the example and bring this back to the world of a job shop. So how might the example of the restaurant translate into the job shop world? Well, let's assume normal is running 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and just one shift, okay? Well, as the owner of a shop, you might consider running 4 10-hour shifts, so 4 10s, perhaps running 3 10-hour shifts and allowing workers to find part-time jobs elsewhere, okay? That's one choice. You might consider off-time shifts for support personnel. So let's say that you can only have 10 folks in your building at any one time. You've kind of done the math and rearranged everything. You figured out how to bring in 10 machinists, and they can work and run the machines, but you really can't operate the tool room. That'd be person number 11. And you'd rather have these folks here together to be productive and actually get jobs done. So what you might consider is bringing in the tool room staff on second shift or a back shift to do what they need to do and still maintain kind of that social distancing and meet the requirements and guidelines that your state may have for you. You might ensure that key resources operate 24/7 to the extent possible and work is available for those resources. So we typically, when we work with folks, one of the things we find is that one resource is the resource. It's the newest CNC machine. It's the most accurate. It's just so much easier to run on. We do better on this machine. Okay, fine. Well, how many hours a day does it operate? About 8. And so you kind of have to scratch your head and go, all right, well, if it's so critical, why don't we run it all the time? We don't have to run every machine in the shop 24/7. Maybe just this one particular machine, or maybe this one particular cell in the shop makes sense to run more. Maybe 2 shifts, it may be 3 shifts. Whatever it is, leverage it, okay? We may bring in outsourced items. We may bring those back in-house, and perhaps they must use older machines or manual methods. Maybe it's not ideal from a quote-unquote cost accounting perspective, but we know from a throughput margin perspective and from throughput accounting that if we can bring things back internal without expending operating expense, we're able to save those totally variable costs that we would otherwise be paying, okay? We could utilize technology tools like that ERP that you spent so much on. Now, why do we put this in there? We see a lot of shops that have ERPs, and it doesn't matter which one it is. It could be Infor, Visual, E2, Job Boss, you name it, we've seen it. the thing about it is, though, people don't use them to manage the processes that can be managed with an ERP. Now, we'll be the first to tell you, ERPs are woefully inadequate for many, if not most, processes. But one thing they are good at doing is storing and transferring information about your jobs between folks. So what we would say is input key information into jobs and the route sheets. Why? Well, that engineer that designed the job and the router, like we said, he might be at the house, unavailable. Well, if it's in the ERP, we can still get the information we need. Okay? The salesperson that has all the technical requirements for the job, make sure it's in the system. You may not be available, and yet the folks on the floor need that information to run the job. Make sure it's there, and the ERP is a great way to do that. We want to transact jobs and inventories items properly. So we got to actually tell the system what's going on. What do we use? What do we put into inventory? Where is all the stuff at? Because we may have buyers and our sales team making decisions remotely, and if they can't lay eyes on the inventory, they've got to rely on that ERP to be correct, to hold the right levels of inventory, and just to report what's actually sitting on the shelf before they commit to a customer. And then finally, we might use the ERP as somewhat intended, so we can have it queue tasks for people. Now, I'm not talking about scheduling. What I'm talking about is, let's say our office staff is working remotely. Well, how do we know when to invoice a job? I mean, if your AR clerk is not live fire there at the shop looking at something get completed and taking in the packing slip and the shipping documents and that kind of thing, how does someone know when to invoice? Well, the ERPs can be set up to guide people and almost create like work queues. So when something has been shipped, we can receive a notification, and now my AR clerk working from the house knows to go in and bill that job. So use the ERPs to the extent possible. We realize they're not perfect, but they can help you guys facilitate communicating between people at the shop and those working remotely in this time. Okay, so that's how we might manage capacity. What about managing productivity at a job shop? Well, how might we translate that example into the job shop world? So if you're the owner of a shop, you might change your job mix and service offerings. So perhaps you stop offering to do work without a deposit. You might eliminate project management services that customers try to get you to do. You may go to a cash in advance model for new customers and realize, hey, new customers during this time would be great, but new customers also represent a credit risk. And as a forensic accountant, I'll give you the heads up here. What happens typically is it's a small order, a small order, a small order, a huge order. And you as a business owner are like, man, this is great. We've got 3 running orders. Now we got this big order. They must love us. They do, because they're about to get this huge order delivered and never pay you. They love it. So just be on the watch. And if you see that happen in your business, make the call and say, listen, dear Mr. New Customer, I love the fact that you sent me this big order. However, I would love it if you could fund 40% of it up front so that I can buy materials and get started. Would that be impossible to do? And that way you can test the waters early, and I might also put some strings attached to the shipment. Maybe you break that shipment out into smaller quantities, different releases, and make sure you start getting paid early and often, lest you let every one of these jobs and parts out of your shop never to be paid. Okay. Now, another way we might be productive or more productive is to reduce time on jobs. Now, I know that's a novel concept and that no one's ever thought of this before. Well, it's still available as an opportunity, and we see it all the time. We might do this via setup reduction. We might buy improved tooling, better programming. There are a myriad ways to reduce time on the job. But the key is that it shortens the duration that job is in our shop. It gets it out the door faster, and that means we collect money sooner. That's the key. We might think about serving new markets. So this is kind of, a little bit out there, but here we go. Perhaps you lend employees to customers, suppliers, or maybe even your competitors. So maybe you don't have enough work in your shop to stay, profitable and keep everyone not busy, but productive, making items to generate the throughput margin you need. We work a lot with folks that are in the repair industry and they do turnarounds. And so if you have a customer that's going through a turnaround, and let's say you had a few extra welders with not a lot to do, well, maybe you quote unquote rent out the welders to your customer, and maybe they get the added capacity that they can actually utilize, and maybe they get it at rates that are preferable and advantageous to them. But it keeps everyone on an equal footing. You're able to make some money. You're able to pay the bills, keep the guys employed, and your customer's a happy customer as well. That's one option. Finally, you might utilize throughput accounting to guide operational decisions. Now, why in the midst of this storm would we think about changing our accounting system? That seems like a distraction. It seems like it can't be that impactful. Well, let me tell you why you might do this. Cost and cost accounting blocks many potential sources of productivity improvements that are available to you. They're there. They're on your shop floor right now. They're staring you in the face. They scream at you when you walk by. You can't hear them and you can't see them because you're using cost accounting. Let me give you an example. When I was a controller, we had a baby press brake and we had a big Bertha of a press brake. Okay. Now, being the naive controller that I was and just an accountant, I said to myself, well, wait a minute. If the small press brake can bend the part, surely the big press brake can bend the part too. So I went to our operators and I asked, and they said, yeah, I mean, that's true, Bo. Assuming we had the right tooling, which we do, there's overlapping tooling in many cases, we could do that. I said, okay, well, why don't we take some of these jobs that are queued up behind the small press brake for the next, 8 to 12 weeks and move them over to the big press brake, complete, ship, and invoice those jobs and go ahead and start making money. Instead of paying these guys to stand there at the big press brake waiting on the next big job to come through. Well, they looked at me and they said, well, Bo, we could do that, but you already know the answer to it. We think you're trying to trick us. It would cost too much. And I was go, no. What would the cost be? What extra check will I have to write? They said, well, what about the labor cost? What about the fact that it uses a bigger machine? There's higher depreciation costs. There's more overhead costs. I said, guys, we're paying the rent. We already got to pay the lease on the building no matter what. I'm already paying the workers. We've already got the utility bill. The lights are already cut on. What more do I have to pay? And so that's just one example of how throughput accounting would have said, run those jobs, take them off the small press brake, put them on the big press brake. You realize there's no more cost to what you're doing, but there is the ability to bring in more throughput margin in the same period, that same month, and we would have made more money. So it may not be top of your priority list, but do consider utilizing throughput accounting to guide your operational decisions because it can unlock so many different avenues of pulling in more throughput margin and being more productive. So how might we manage capacity and pricing at a job shop? How can we translate this restaurant example into the job shop world? Well, boy, howdy, we're glad you asked. You could sign up for the job shop pricing system. Now, why might you do that? Well, we know what you know, right? You can't just raise prices. You could lose a customer at the worst possible time. Raising prices is risky, and you got to know where to do it. You got to know how to do it and why to do it and when to do it. It's not just raise prices. If that was, if the solution was that easy, we wouldn't all be here today for the video. So if you want to successfully improve your pricing and your profitability, you must know what prices are needed in order to break even in bad times and make money in normal times. Now, this means you must know how jobs can contribute more to your profitability via productivity, not efficiency improvements, the customers and market segments that pay better prices, and the prices you can confidently charge to win jobs and be profitable. So, unfortunately, if your capacity is reduced, your shop may not generate enough throughput margin and could lose money. And so, we think the job shop pricing system is a viable alternative during this time to help you guys reconcile your capacity that you have to your pricing and ultimately to your bottom line. So that's how we might recommend that you guys manage capacity and pricing at your shop. And if you were interested, reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Now, kind of moving back into the buy-in process, well, once we select the direction of the solution to go in, anything we do is going to have predicted negative effects. And we discussed this last time. Instead of saying, well, there are unintended consequences and we couldn't see this coming, we don't think like that. What we say is, let's sit down and take the time to think through any possible negative implications coming from our actions and recognize and identify the ways to overcome those negative effects that we know are coming. So in this scenario, well, what may happen as a negative effect? Well, customers may buy less if prices are raised or not at all. So going back to the restaurant example, if you raise prices to $52 for a meal, people may say, just forget it. I'll just cook it at the house, right? Same thing with parts. Just forget it. We'll just bring it back in-house and make it internally. Customers may shop your work around if you raise prices. Customers may agree to price increases, but they may not pay the invoice. They may go, oh, yeah, sounds great, Brad. I look forward to paying you more. And, don't worry, the check's in the mail, never to arrive. Customers may not accept the new terms of doing business with you, okay? So what does that mean we need to do? We better understand the customers and segments that could accept a price increase. And so if that's our objective and we actually had this accomplished, we would know how to avoid these negative effects here, or at least mitigate them to the extent possible. Now, what else may come from this? Employees may complain about doing more for the same pay. Employees may take actions to provoke you to lay them off. So, if you're going to say, guys, this is kind of a wild time, we're going to have to do more, but I can't raise wages today. Well, some people may be subversive. They may try to take more breaks. They may bring the phone out on the floor with them. They may just, try to provoke you to fire them because they don't want to work. The employees may not like new or different schedules. And hey, if you have a union presence in your shop, well, the union may not accept changes to the schedules or the job roles and functions without pay increases or other items. And it may not be feasible right now for you, honestly. You say, I would love to pay you more, to work more. We just don't have that ability. We need to, and that's the point of this video today, is to shape that conversation you're having with these folks, is to say, listen, just to survive, we have no choice but to do more, just to survive. It's not like, I'm a robber baron and I'm going to pull up in a Bentley next week. I'm not even going to make money. We're just going to pay the bills and break even. And so that's one of the key things to realize out of this. When your capacity is cut back, it takes a lot more just to break even. Finally, as a predicted negative effect, well, if we start running 2 shifts or operating in a way that we have not previously, well, we may lose track of key details and accountability across shifts. I remember the experience of working with a motor shop, and when they rewind a motor, the winders are putting the coils back in the armature or in the stator, that type thing. And it's kind of like, this is Bo's armature. I'm going to work on this all week long. This is my job. And if something goes wrong with it, you can blame me. But in this new world, what may happen is Bo works this armature first shift, and Brad comes and works the same armature second shift. Okay. Well, who caused what problem? How do we manage that situation? Because Brad doesn't want to be held accountable for my work, and I don't want to be held accountable for his work, perhaps. So we need to think these operational realities through and have a plan in place. And then finally here in the buy-in process, the last step is to agree on objectives to overcome implementation obstacles. So the negative impacts were addressed above from the actions we're taking. Now we're asking, what does it actually take to make this happen and get it in place? So number one, we have determined the productivity goals and pricing changes we would like to implement and evaluated their projected financial impact. Now, said differently, we basically have ran through different scenarios like this and evaluated financially what's going to happen to our business. And are the changes we're proposing sufficient to help us break even or make money? 2, we have identified internal stakeholders, that being employees, the union, managers, etc., and developed an implementation plan for the proposed changes involving key staff in its development. We have developed a customer communication plan for pricing changes for what we're doing. that being the pricing, terms, and conditions, when it becomes effective, and how we deliver that messaging, okay? So if we're going to be raising prices, asking for cash in advance and tighter requirements and providing less project management services, well, we probably just don't want to blast that out in an email, dear customer, here are the changes, blah, 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 blah. Look forward to doing more business with you. It may not go over that well. So we may need to call folks, prepare folks. Forewarned is forearmed. And so how you deliver that messaging and how you communicate it really has a big impact on how it's accepted. Okay. 4, we have identified and trained key staff to deliver our practice and pricing changes. So they know why, what, when, and how, and they are prepared to now communicate that to the customers. And then 5, we monitor financial and operational performance to ensure that we're on track. So what we wouldn't want to do is increase prices and go up to our little scenario and fool ourselves into thinking, man, look at this, Brad. We're going to raise prices 47%, and we're going to make all the money we made previously. And we won't even be that busy. This is going to be fantastic. Little did we know that our win rate went from 20% to 5%. Okay? We need to do these things in a controlled fashion, and we need to ensure that what we're doing is actually producing the effects we want. Operationally, we may say, guys, we've got to push harder than we've pushed before. Well, we want to make sure that folks are showing up on time. We want to make sure that folks are present, that they're there, they're doing what they need to do, not goofing off or subverting things. Make sure quality problems don't emerge, right? So there's a whole host of things coming at us, and we need to be able to monitor them both financially and operationally to make sure we get there. Now, to evaluate the financial impact of actions, you can also see our Cash Management for Job Shops webinar, and that can be found at www.jobshoppricing.com/cash. There, what we do is translate some of these actions that we might take here from this video, any one of these different scenarios, and build that into financial projections and ultimately convert that into a 13-week cash flow model so that we can see what we're doing week to week for the next about 3 months with our cash and make sure we're still generating sufficient levels of cash. If we have a shortfall, we can identify it earlier and begin to mitigate that well in advance of it arriving, okay? So what we would say in closing is talk to us before it's too late. If you like help applying the concepts from this video to your shop, we are offering a free, confidential, no obligation financial health and cash management checkup. We're going to send you the Excel file that we use to assess your financial situation. And during that checkup, we're going to review your financial projections and discuss potential scenarios, review your balance sheet for potential sources of cash. Third, and finally, evaluate the sources of cash that are available to you. We say talk to us before it's too late. I liken it to my experience when I was in public accounting. People would, just notorious. They would call you after the fact and ask you, well, Bo, how's this going to impact my taxes? What about my audit? What about the bank covenants? And you had to grit your teeth and go, well, had you spent $150 for a 1-hour phone call with me, I could have saved you, $150,000 of tax expense, or we could have rearranged this transaction and you would have made your bank covenants. Now, because you did it this way, you're going to blow the debt covenants, and now you got to, realize that you're going to be paying more interest expense, fees, penalties, any number of things just to get the lender off your back. You may even need a new bank now. So call us now, reach out to us now, and talk to us now before it's too late.
But the conversation's free. It's not $150.
Yeah, but it's worth a lot more than that.
It sure is. Now, for the people that may not be financially astute or have a lot of resources to help prepare this, how much are we asking for in 1, 2, and 3? Is this going to take them hours and hours to do, or?
So what we're asking for isn't very heavy duty, and the template we're going to provide to you only requires that you have your revenue and then some historical results. So if you could provide revenue, material, and basic operating expenses for the last several months, let's say 3 to 6 months, you can pull this together very quickly. It's not a exercise in tedium. It shouldn't take you more than 1 or 2 hours at most, and that's if you went really detailed with it. So
And the balance sheet would just be the most recent balance sheet they have prepared through whatever system they use.
Right. It could be, we've seen, well, I've seen, boy, howdy, I've seen shoebox full of receipts and different things, but we go from that to QuickBooks to ERPs to, SAP and Oracle and really bigger ERPs. But whatever system you're using, the balance sheet it generates, that would be suitable for that. So thank you guys for your time today. And as we say, talk to us before it's too late. Go to jobshoppricing.com/checkup and request a checkup. So this has been our second video. We have more coming, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.